Canada right now is a perfect example of high status versus low status. So the most shocking sight for me and the most revealing sight was when a bunch of woke protesters turned up to have a counter protest against the truckers, and the woke protesters were chanting trans rights are human rights. Now, the Ottawa truckers' protest had nothing whatsoever to do with trans issues or gender fluidity or all that other nonsense that woke people like to talk about. But what we had there were essentially, the upper class, highly educated, woke left bringing their high status opinions to bear upon these ruffians, these rough-necked working class truckers who they look upon with utter contempt. They were essentially reprimanding them with high status opinions. That's really what was taking place. And I think what's so fascinating about the truckers' protests is that it is a new form of class war. We've got the working classes who want better working conditions and the right to earn a living. And the new ruling class is the woke regime, the kind of Trudeau tyranny, which rails against these workers by accusing them of being racist or transphobic or insufficiently woke. So this is the new class war that we're witnessing in Canada, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're talking about this on a day when Vladimir Putin has just made his move in Ukraine. You keep thinking when people show up at a protest and it's something to do with transgender rights, but they're waving all these transgender slogans, that at some point something is going to happen in the world that will force us to get real. But I mean, if we woke up one morning and saw that the Ayatollahs had just nuked some country, maybe, or Kim Jong-un, maybe by accident. He was aiming at Japan, but he accidentally hit Slovenia. You get the feeling that we digest it for 10 minutes and then all go back to talking about net zero and transgender bathrooms.
Yeah, and pronouns and all the rest of it. There's a fall of Rome element to all of this. So, despite all the various crazy things that are going on in the world, including the rise of new, literally barbaric movements in terms of ISIS and other forms of radical Islam, despite all of that disturbing stuff, you have people in the West with, time-rich millennials and people with far too much time and money on their hands obsessing over the most stupid stuff. Where do they fit exactly on the gender ruler? How should we refer to them? What are their pronouns? What's the correct speech to use in every single situation? They have these kind of bizarre linguistic obsessions. There's a real disconnect between reality, which feels increasingly unstable and tense, especially in geopolitical terms, and the world in which these people live, which is completely removed from everything else. So there's a kind of, Rome is falling, the barbarians are at the gates in some ways, and these people are fiddling around with their gender pronouns. And I think it's where the kind of the new ruling class is at the moment. I think they're very disorientated, very confused. They don't understand the world around them or the societies that they are ruling, and that's given rise to a pretty tense situation in lots of countries.
Well, there's a cynicism there too, though, isn't it? Because when you look at the people who rampage around from the left's point of view, in America, you get bailed. Well, if you even get bail, you'll be bailed out by a Kamala Harris staffer or by Kevin Spacey or Seth Rogen or another Hollywood celebrity. In Her Majesty's dominions, we don't have quite as many celebrities as that, but it doesn't matter because you can destroy all these statues, and they don't even charge you now. So that has to be just a cynical move that's just about power, doesn't it?
Oh, it's deeply cynical, and it's absolutely riddled with double standards. And I think, as you were saying earlier, what the kind of BLM, Antifa, statue-smashing movement, what that really represents is the shock troops of the new elites. That's why the Democrats in the US essentially gave a green light to some of those BLM riots in 2020. They saw it as a way of dislodging Trump or weakening Trump, and they refused to refer to it as looting. They even refused to refer to it as rioting. They said they were mostly peaceful protests. It's, people letting off steam. They basically gave a green light to that kind of behavior because they recognized in that movement, that kind of statue smashing, building burning movement, something that might be useful for them in terms of increasing their cultural and political power. So I think the same thing has happened in Canada, where, as you were saying earlier, people tore down statues and not very much happened to them. But as soon as ordinary working class people stand up for their rights and actually challenge the status quo, that's what these truckers are doing. They're challenging the status quo of technocratic governance, of the patrician woke government of which Justin Trudeau is such an expert. They're challenging that. They really are posing a threat to the status quo in the Western world. And that's why there has been such an extreme reaction and such extreme contempt from the commentariat, because they recognize that these protesters are raising important questions about how the world is run at the moment.